Welcome to One on One. I'm Greg Bassett, your host from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. It's a big day here at Pack 14. They're all big, but we've got one of my favorite people in the whole world today, John Phoebus, our local defense attorney. Welcome, John.
Greg, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So your firm is Anthenelli, Phoebus, and
Hickman.
Hickman, right. And so you worked with the great Jim Anthenelli, who's a legend in this town in terms of criminal law.
Jim was. My first job, actually before I even passed the bar, I worked for both Jim Anthenelli and Jim Otway during law school, was fortunate enough to be hired on as an associate for those guys right out of school. Worked primarily with Jim Anthenelli, who, as you said, was probably the go-to top criminal defense attorney here on the shore for years, and it taught me a lot of things about the practice of criminal defense. Went out on my own for probably 10 or 15 years, and then later on, Jim and I then became partners. So instead of being an associate with him, he and I formed a partnership, brought in former Somerset County elected state's attorney Christy Hickman, and we formed Anthenelli, Phoebus and Hickman. So Jim, of course, passed several years back, but we continue his legacy by keeping his name on our firm and also trying to practice law with the same values that he had as a practicing attorney.
You know, in his passing, and not to be morbid, but when we posted the information from his passing, it's still the number one viewed story on my website in the 7 years that we've had the paper, like well over 100,000 page views. He must have known a lot of people across the world because they all looked at his obituary on our newspaper website.
He really did, and we've been struck just over the years. It tells you the relationship Jim had with his clients. Clients will call not knowing Jim has passed, and will break into tears on the phone when we tell them the news. He was just that close to everyone he represented. They considered him not only to be their lawyer, but to be a good friend, and he found friends in all the clients that he represented. And the sadness that his former clients greet that news with is just a testament to how well loved he was.
Now, not to embarrass you, but I kind of watched you grow up down there in Crisfield. I was good friends with your dad, Harry T. Phoebus Jr., who was just like one of the greatest guys I ever knew. And I loved him and missed him. He was a lawyer. He was a different kind of lawyer.
He was.
And I expected you to be the kind of lawyer that he was, doing a lot of municipal law and family law and stuff, property law, I believe, real estate. But you've gone into criminal law. What made you think you wanted to be a criminal lawyer? Because that's a tough trade.
And if you had asked me in law school what kind of lawyer I thought I would be, it probably would have been more following in my father's footsteps. But the days of the country lawyer, the jack of all trades, really have gone to the wayside. The law is so specialized these days. The saying is jack of all trades and master of none. So lawyers specialize in things, and I just love the excitement of being in court, trying cases, standing in front of juries. If you like to try cases, not settle cases, not work up files, but actually to be in court trying cases, practicing criminal law, either as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney, is where the action's at, so to speak. So it's the exciting cases are there, and I learned early on what the cases were that got me to court were the criminal cases, and then it turned out I was actually pretty good at it. So I've over the years have shed other practice areas. I know how to do a lot because when I first started on my own in Crisfield, I was a jack of all trades attorney and handled real estate, wills, things like that. Now we focus our practice. I do almost all criminal defense. My partner, Christy Hickman, does mostly family law, and we do some personal injury cases, helping people recover damages from car wrecks, for instance, as well. But those are the only three things we do, and they all involve litigation, which is what we love. And that's what's fun about being a criminal defense attorney, because the standard is it's not whether a person did the offense or not. It's can the state of Maryland prove that they did it beyond a reasonable doubt. And we as a society say that we would rather let several guilty people go than put one innocent person in jail. So the burden of proof is intentionally very high, and it's fun to try to find that doubt and to create that doubt. And sometimes, many times, you won't know where it's going to come from until you're in the middle of a case.
Big fan of Law and Order. I'll watch them for days on end and not shave and just be there in front of the TV. I've seen them all 30 times. I know it's not an accurate reflection of the court system, but I really enjoy that dynamic between the prosecutors and the defense attorneys and just the stuff that goes on. Is any of that real? Does that kind of happen in your life to a degree?
I mean, some of my greatest friends and colleagues are prosecutors that do battle with me on a daily basis. My current law partner, Christy Hickman, made a career out of trying to lock my clients up as state's attorney, as Somerset County state's attorney. She knows the record. I'm not going to put it on TV, but she beat me a lot, and but we became good, fast friends by having the cases together. And there's professionalism. I mean, when you go into courtroom, it's war, and you're fighting the other side. But these are also professional colleagues that you're going to encounter again and again and again, and those relationships are important. I remember Dad said to me when I was a very young attorney, Logan Woodison was the state's attorney in Somerset County, and I was fired up about something on the case. And Dad said, John, he called me Sport. He said, Sport, you need to remember you're going to have a lot more cases with Logan Woodison than you're going to have for that one client. So you need to think about that relationship as well. And when you're in court all the time, it's how you conduct yourself and how you behave with the other attorneys is very important. And there's prosecutors that I like a lot, and prosecutors that we enjoy fighting against a lot. But we're all part of the same court system. We learned recently we're part of what's called continuity of government with the COVID plans.
Very much, yes.
So that's been a big change this year. Is what the impact that COVID has had on the courts. Just we haven't had really any jury trials since last March of 2020. We joke that there's going to be a backlog. Not joke. There's going to be a backlog. We know there's going to be a backlog, and one of the fastest trial attorneys there was Bill Simpson, who's still in retirement. We're gonna bring him back and not let him leave the courthouse until he gets us through all of our cases.
Yeah, Judge Simpson is very efficient.
He is. And if we could have 6 Judge Simpsons, we could get rid of the backlog in the course of a few months. But it will be some work trying to figure that out. And we've all tried to triage our cases, see what things can actually get moved across the finish line during this time period. But we currently have jury boxes that look like cookie cutters with plexiglass between all the juror things. It's going to be very interesting when things get going. They had a few jury trials in October. I think David Weck had one of them, a public defender here in Salisbury. Maybe there were 2 other jury trials, and then we quickly closed the system back up again.
One of the great lines from Law and Order, there's a bail hearing scene, and one of the prominent lawyers is there with his client, and the judge says, yes, Mr. Whatever, this is the 400th time you've appeared before me, and all 400 of your clients have been innocent.
Well, you get a reputation as an attorney. I like for the judges to always think that whatever we are arguing is correct. And Jim taught me, Jim Anthenelli, that you take each case as if it's a brand new case. You pull the statute book out, even if you've read the statute 100 times, you read it again, and you only make arguments to the court that you think are going to succeed. So we try not to be the broken record there, but the attorneys who are picking the arguments that are going to win the cases for their clients.
Can we talk about what a person should do if they get pulled over by a police officer, how they should conduct themselves?
Sure.
We've had Mike Lewis on here, and he talks that people aren't trained in what to do. They don't know how to treat the officer. They do things that cause trouble for themselves, either unknowingly or on purpose. I get pulled over. What do I do?
So the number one thing to do is to be polite and respectful to the police officer pulling you over. I say to my clients who are anticipating getting arrested all the time, it's going to happen. You're not going to win the case in that interaction with the police officer right there. All you can possibly do is make things worse. And the things you can do to make things worse are any profanity, any disrespect to the police officer. You have to remember, from a police officer's perspective, officer safety is the number one thing. My friends who are in law enforcement, they all want to come home to their spouses and their children at the end of every shift. So, no sudden movements. Sometimes we think we're being helpful by reaching in the glove box and getting our documents ready to hand to the police officer, but that can be perceived as it looks just the same as if you're reaching for a handgun to do harm. So wait until you're given commands from the police officer before you do anything. We should all have our licenses and our registration handy to provide to police officers. You don't have to agree to perform the tests that are asked of you by police. If you have been drinking and driving, under the Constitution, you have a Fifth Amendment privilege not to incriminate yourself, and that means you don't have to answer the questions that the police officer asks you. Now, there are consequences to not answering those questions, and one of the most significant is the impact that has on someone's driver's license. And in Maryland, you get punished both criminally for the DUI, meaning that if you're driving driving under the influence of alcohol or impaired by alcohol, you're going to get charged with a crime. But then if you fail that breath test that you take, or you refuse to take that breath test, your license is going to be suspended for a while. It's increasingly easy to get Ubers and Lyfts and ride shares. So it's the best thing to do, of course, is not to drink and drive to begin with.
Right, so there's no excuse in terms of convenience. There's always another area, another way to get a ride.
There is. And we found over the years that juries are becoming less and less tolerant of drinking and driving. It's a generational thing. If you're 40 or 50 or 60 years old on a jury, you may give a person a pass for a DUI and be more inclined to find reasonable doubt. We're finding the younger generations who are brought up on always having a designated driver, always having that Uber or the Lyft available, or the buses that are around here, are very intolerant of drinking and driving. And you get a jury of millennials, and they're going to convict someone of the DUI perhaps a little faster than an older jury would.
So if I refuse to take the test, do they automatically arrest me and take me to the barrack, or what happens?
So generally, the police officers are going to ask you to take the test if they already have some evidence that you've been drinking alcohol. That could be an odor of alcohol, your performance, your not being able to hand them your driver's license, slurred speech, that sort of thing. So they've probably made a decision whether to arrest you or not anyway. Most people will be taken to the police barracks. There's a lot of paperwork that gets filled out. They're generally handcuffed for that. And this, again, is where being polite and cooperative just meaning not fighting the police officer, not making their job any harder, not necessarily taking the test, it goes a long way, because the police officer will have the decision whether to release you on citations at the time or to take you to, as we call it in Salisbury, 411, which is where the Wycomico County Detention Center is,
right,
for a commissioner to decide whether you're going to come home or not. And even if the commissioner ultimately says you're going to come home, they're not going to make that decision for 12 or 24 hours.
Right.
So you're going to feel very much as if you were in jail.
And that's a smell you'll never get out of your nose when you're in jail.
That's what I'm told. And jail's not a place people want to be these days with COVID, that's for sure.
Now, I've heard some lawyers say, don't say anything. Just don't say anything. Just sit there and just nod or, grunt.
There's a YouTube video to that effect, and it sometimes makes police officers feel as if you're having a medical emergency.
Right.
And next thing you know, you're at the psych ward of PRMC being evaluated because you can't seem to understand the English language. I'm not a fan of that. You absolutely, there's nothing wrong with saying, officer, with all due respect, I'm not answering any of your questions. I'm not taking any of your tests. You let me know what else you need from me. Here's my license. Here's my registration. It lets the police officer know that you're not going to fight them, not going to be argumentative, but that you're also very clearly not taking the test.
That's interesting what you say about the millennials. I hadn't thought about that, because I think maybe my generation are like, that's no big deal. Like, who cares? But I've seen that in my kids where they do have a designated driver. And I always thought maybe they were just saying that for my benefit, so I'd feel better about what they were up to. But that's actually what they do. That's part of the culture now. That's something that we've been able to change.
It's a positive thing. I mean, look, we represent a lot of people charged with drinking and driving, but there are incredibly bad consequences from drinking and driving. People kill other people. I mean, the statistics are there that, the roads are much safer if people aren't. So, kudos to that generation for doing it. We're seeing it. I mean, college-age kids these days, they pick somebody to be their driver, and they all go with them. Or Salisbury University does a great job with their sober rides, even for the off-campus parties that the college really doesn't want to have happen. They will get sober rides to take all the kids home. So there are fewer and fewer reasons to ever drink and drive, which I think is making it more serious. And the punishments are getting worse and worse. Governor Hogan just signed a bill that it's hard to imagine someone would get convicted of a fourth DUI. But the punishment for a fourth DUI as of October 1, 2020 is 10 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, or both. So the stakes are very, very high.
I'm amazed at how many people that I know who work in the restaurant industry who have the blow things in their car. That's a new thing.
It is. This
is where they have to do a breathalyzer to get their car to start, for people who might not know.
They do. If you refuse to take a breath test, if you take and fail a breath test and you have a high breath test level, you have a second offense DUI, you're going to get a blow-and-go device installed in your vehicle. What's funny is how the technology has changed over the blow-and-go devices over the years, because it's been a counter move between people trying to fool the device and the MVA, which wants to make sure people don't fool the device. In the old days, you just blew into the machine. And what people were doing is they were filling up balloons while they were sober, keeping them in the back of their car, and then hooking the balloon to it. So now you have to hum when you blow into the thing to let it know there's a real person. I made the mistake of telling a good old young boy from the west side of Wycomico County that, and he fashioned a device which was a duck call hooked to an air compressor hooked to his blow and go device. So every time his device went off, he just flipped the switch. And he came to me and he wanted to patent it and sell it on Amazon.com, which there is a dark area of Amazon.com which has all kinds of quasi-legal devices, but we suggested that would not be a good thing. Now they've even beat that, because as of 2 years ago, all the ignition interlock devices sold in Maryland or rented in Maryland have a selfie camera on there. So every time someone blows to take the test, it takes a selfie of them to make sure it's actually that person taking the test. Hopefully the Russians won't hack it, and you'll have a website full of the most embarrassing looking photos that you can imagine.
I was at a party pre-COVID, and we were out on this back porch, and one of the people, we kind of knew the guy, arrived. And he goes in, and then he comes back out, and he goes out to his car, and we were like, why are you leaving already? He goes, oh, I'm just going back to my car to start it and to do the breathalyzer. And we're like, what do you mean? He goes, I'm going to get in trouble in there because there's like great selection of alcohol, so I need to get my car started so when I come out in 3 hours, I can drive away. And I was like, that should be a sign that you've got a problem.
It is, and the breath test machines don't let you do that anymore.
Okay.
As soon as you put the car in gear and start going, it will make you take the test again.
Oh.
So, and what a lot of people don't realize is it's dialed into a .025, so that's any alcohol whatsoever.
That's incredible.
It is. It's quite an industry. It's they have the scram devices that attach to people's ankles now to make sure they're sober. The breath test machines in the vehicles. The laws are changing. In Utah, I went skiing in Utah the year before last, and the legal limit in Utah is .05.
Wow.
And the restaurant industry certainly is fighting back against it, because the science really establishes around a .10 or a .15 is where your cognitive abilities really affect significantly your ability to operate a vehicle safely. It's now just become a lower level thing where we're suggesting to people not to drink and drive whatsoever, so that 2 glasses of wine with a steak dinner one night is probably going to put you over the .05.
You're kind of well known for some of your observations, things that you see in court, and there's some crazy stuff that goes on in court. But one thing that's consistent is people not dressing appropriately for court.
Indeed. It's I have a Facebook page, and occasionally I will make observations about not my clients.
Not your clients.
My clients are all told how to dress as if you would for a job interview.
It's sort of a what were they thinking kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, but it's also it's someone's a friend of mine, Arch McFadden, who's a longtime public defender in Salisbury, commented one time. He said, "You just have to imagine that this morning." That person stood up, looked in the mirror, and said, I'm going to stand in front of a judge who's going to decide where I could be for the next 10 years, the next 20 years of my life, and this is the look that I'm going for. And sometimes it's like Joe Pesci in that movie where he shows up in the waiter's uniform. You can overdress for court.
Right.
I've seen tuxedos and prom dresses before, but at least there you would suggest that people are trying to dress as well as they can. It's the T-shirts that say only God can judge me that probably are inappropriate.
There's some with just really rude things on them they wear to court.
The marijuana chic look is the bad look, and while marijuana is increasingly tolerated in Maryland, in fact, anyone can get a cannabis card. You probably shouldn't come to court wearing a marijuana leaf on your jacket.
I feel for the judges too, because they put up with this stuff. They encounter these people who are really on the wrong side of the law and just have all these problems. I mean, just incredible problems, and they have to sort through all this. And I know I was in court one day watching another case. In the case before, Judge Jackson, Newt Jackson, was on the bench, and it was a case where this guy was coming into town from Seaford. He had all kinds of armaments in his trunk, and he was coming to Salisbury at 9:30 on a Saturday night to do something to somebody, to threaten somebody or whatever. He might have been a bookie or something worse than that. He got pulled over by the Arby's up by the mall, and they got all these guns. and the guns had been sent to the state because I guess you have to prove that they could be fired. That
Right,
they were
that'd be
fireable
operable.
weapons. And the guy and the lawyer had continued and continued. The state police detective investigator person didn't show up in court, and Judge Jackson had to let this guy go. And he knew he was letting a bad guy go. The guy wasn't getting the correct hearing. And I just remember him taking his glasses off and putting them on his head and just staring at the ceiling because he was trying to keep from losing his temper because the system had sort of failed this. It was nothing with the local prosecutors. The defense attorney was just doing his job. The state had screwed this up somehow. And he really wanted to lose it because he didn't want to let this guy go, but he had to. And it was like 5 minutes he just stared at the ceiling because he was so angry. And I felt so bad for him because he couldn't really do his job.
But he did do his job that day, and the toughest thing a judge will have to do sometimes is when the judge knows that the person did it because of and most procedural errors aren't technicalities. They're in that case it was probably the person's right to have a speedy trial.
Absolutely.
And justice delayed is justice denied. We're facing a lot of that just because of COVID. No one's fault. But when I was on the JNC, the Judicial Nominating Commission, we interviewed lots of lawyers, and the question that especially got asked of prosecutors who went to be a judge is: imagine you've got the worst case you can possibly think of standing in front of you, and the law says that you're going to have to let the person go. Can you do it? And judges swear an oath to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the United States and the state of Maryland. And if that requires them to let the person go, they should. And it's one of the harder things judges have to do, but it's also the right thing to do. Not from a moral perspective, perhaps, but from a legal perspective.
It's interesting, in our judge ranks, we've got judges from all different backgrounds. Some have been prosecutors. I can't think of one that's been a criminal. Some have been like the regular lawyers. But I always wondered how you guys walk that line where you're a defense attorney 1 minute, or a prosecutor 1 minute, then you become a defense attorney, and then you go to be a judge. I mean, do you have any biases toward one area of the law or another? But you're saying that's one of the questions they ask.
It's a question that's asked, and a lot of times you'll see people will turn out differently than you would expect. Some of the toughest judges are former public defenders, and some of the judges that are a judge that can be fair and can say not guilty when they have to are former prosecutors. No one really knows what happens when you put the robe on. It's kind of it's a guess what's going to happen, but we try to ferret out who the good and the bad are going to be. And I think in large part we have judges that do their job around here and try to make those right decisions.
I know because you were head of the Judicial Nominating Commission, a very complicated job. Most people don't understand how that works. That might be one of the most important public service things you ever did.
Yeah, and a lot of vacancies came open during the 3 years I was on it, and certainly during Governor Hogan's 8 years, 6 years he's been governor now. He's had an opportunity to shape the judiciary on the Lower Eastern Shore and a generational change. They talk about all the judges that Donald Trump appointed as president. Larry Hogan has appointed a tremendous number of judges here on the Lower Shore, both on the Circuit Court and on the District Court. The Circuit Court for Wycomico County, more than half of the judges have been appointed by Governor Hogan. He's had a chance to appoint judges on most of the district courts, two judges in Worcester County, a judge in Somerset County. Governor Hogan has favored prosecutors as judges, and you can see that in the people that he has appointed. He's a very law and order focused person. I think the thought is that a former prosecutor is going to be a tough judge, and so that's what we have here on the Eastern Shore. But they made some good decisions, and just very recently, Karen Dean, a former prosecutor in Somerset, Wycomico, and Worcester County, just is the newest judge on the Circuit Court for Wycomico County.
Yeah, and she's interesting because she seems so compassionate to me. I've known her for a lot of years, and I never would have thought of her as a judge-type person.
Karen actually served as a judicial, that we call them magistrates.
Right.
They used to call them domestic masters. And she did juvenile cases. And she was a tough judge when she was a juvenile magistrate. Karen, as a prosecutor, handled some of the toughest cases. She was a sex crimes prosecutor in all 3 counties that she practiced in. And those are probably the most difficult cases that go through her system. And yeah, she certainly has the skills as a litigator. I think she's going to do a good job as a judge.
Yeah, this courtmaster job must be hard because there's a lot of protective orders, family issues. He came to my house, she spit on me. I mean, just awful family drama being played out in court.
I was in court yesterday for one, a domestic violence case, and they're tough, and the courts are very open to people who have domestic violence issues. Some would argue a little too open, and there can be an abuse of the process in the system. You can go in front of a district court commissioner and get a spouse or a partner, life partner, put out of your house for 6 months. During the COVID crisis, especially when the courts were closed, those orders that would normally take effect for 48 hours were lasting for 4 months. So we now have a mechanism to get people in front of judges very quickly to make a determination on that. But those are absolutely tough cases.
Lots of talk these days about equality in the justice system with race and issues like that. Any viewpoints on that? What do you see? Do you feel like there is a bias in courts, or is it just a cultural thing? Is it a economic thing? What happens with all this?
George Floyd was I think a wake-up point for all of America, and I think what you're seeing this year in the General Assembly is there are going to be some changes made from the top down on police use of force. A lot of it is training. Many of the professional organizations I belong to now offer implicit bias training, recognizing the bias that we might not be conscious of that we all may have. And so I think you're going to see increased training, de-escalation training for the police officers. There's a bill called 8 Can't Wait right now in the General Assembly, which would get rid of chokeholds and certain things that have been unfortunately deployed across America. And, look, the vast majority of law enforcement are not murderers, are not out there looking to cause harm to another person. And many of the things that have happened in America are not reflective of the rank and file. I think we have good law enforcement officers here on the Eastern Shore. The big battle that you're going to see in Annapolis is going to be trying to repeal something called the Law Enforcement Officer Bill of Rights. Maryland has that. Several other states have that, which provide protections to police officers before their jobs can be taken away from them. There's a big move in Annapolis to repeal that. I know the police unions are going to fight very hard against it, but it seems that right now with the progressives in both the House and the Senate in Maryland that there's enough votes to get that passed. Delegate Atterbury chaired a task force over the winter. So I think some of it is, we all need to be aware of we shouldn't treat people differently based upon the color of their skin, and we should make sure that our judicial system isn't organized in a way that occurs more often than not. One of the things Maryland's done a great job of recently, and COVID's actually helped, is not incarcerating people pre-trial simply because they can't afford a bail bond. Attorney General Brian Frosh got rid of basically the bail bond industry, and now there's a decision made to just release people on pretrial services or to hold them not based upon their financial means, but based upon the severity of the crime and the likelihood that they're going to cause harm in the community. And what was happening is only people who had the financial resources were able to get out pre-trial. And now many, many more people are getting out pre-trial. When COVID happened, the judges were rightly concerned that they wouldn't want to expose people to the virus who didn't pose a risk to society. And even more people were released pre-trial, which has been positive for the system. If you're released pre-trial, you can work with your defense attorney, you can continue earning a living, and we have things in place in Wycomico County, such as pre-trial supervision that makes sure people aren't on drugs, that they're working regularly, that they're staying in touch with the court. So it's been a fairly positive move.
He's John Phoebus. If you get in trouble, he's the man to call. Not to make a commercial for him, but he's with Anthenelli, Phoebus and Hickman, and we're thrilled he was here to give us some insight today. Thanks for being here, John.
Thanks, Greg. I enjoyed it.
I'm Greg Bassett from the Salisbury Independent newspaper. Another edition of 101 right here on PAC 14.
First Shore Federal is proud to support PAC 14 and one-on-one. We'd encourage every business to support PAC 14 and pick a program and support it, and let's make a difference.